Good evening, all of you. So nice to be with all of you all over again. And thanks for being persistent with me. I started getting your messages regarding economic survey classes the day economic survey was released. So it's pleasing to know that at least you are looking forward to it. So we will begin with the first chapter today. And the way we do it every year, we will do it chapter wise, every chapter. Now, this year they have put in more chapters. They have put in 17 chapters this year. So we will take 17 sessions around 1 hour to 1 hour 15 minutes each. That is how I will go forward. The first chapter is a relatively simpler chapter. The first chapter is majorly on an overview of the economy, the macroeconomic fundamentals, the global situation, and so on. But gradually, as more chapters will come, जैसे fiscal policy का chapter आएगा, monetary policy का chapter आएगा, medium term development के chapters आएंगे, agriculture, external sector. So both from prelims and mains point of view, we will have too much to cover over there. So let's begin with first things first. सर्वे ने शुरुआत की है with external sector, a talk on external sector and overall global system. तो सर्वे ये बात करते हैं कि पूरा ग्लोबल सिस्टम कैसे वर्क कर रहा है. दैट इज व्हाट सर्वे इज टॉकिंग अबाउट. एंड इन दिस ग्लोबल सिस्टम दे टॉक अबाउट द एडवांस्ड इकोनॉमीज, द इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स एंड द ग्लोबल ओवरऑल सिस्टम. तो जो हम सब देख ही रहे हैं अभी, दैट वी हैव अ डिसरप्टिव अपहीवल. द अमेरिकन्स हैव पुट अ टैरिफ एंड द मोर स्ट्रेटेजिकली यू आर कनेक्टेड टू देम, मोर दे आर पनिशिंग यू. ऐसा भी हो रहा है कि जितने लोग अमेरिका से बेटर कनेक्टेड हैं, यूरोप और जापान और साउथ कोरिया, इवन इंडिया विच वाज, हमारे यहाँ तो यज्ञ व्यज्ञ हुए थे ट्रंप को इलेक्ट कराने के लिए, तो उसका नतीजा हमें देखना पड़ रहा है. सो द वर्ल्ड इज इन एन अपहीवल, एवरीबडी इज वरिड, एवरीबडी इज in an uncertain situation. So that is what they mean when they say world is in an upheaval by the tariffs that USA is putting on imports from its trading partners. Then reciprocal tariffs का मतलब है, ये जो टर्म है रेसिप्रोकल टैरिफ्स, कि अमेरिका टैरिफ लगाएंगे और फिर बाकी के ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर्स उन पे टैरिफ लगाएंगे. बट थैंकफुली वर्ल्ड हैज नॉट रिटेलिएटेड मच. इफ यू सी, इंडिया इज स्टिल नेगोशिएटिंग. यूरोपियन यूनियन, साउथ कोरिया, जापान, दे कुड नेगोशिएट विद द अमेरिकans, even with China. When Xi Jinping and Trump met on the occasion of their meeting of the APEC summit, it could be assured that at least we are not having an immediate war. तो अभी क्या है, एक टेंशन वाला एक समय चल रहा है, but in that tension at least everybody is okay, that things are going normal or normalized. So the US is saying 50% tariff and all, but the lower effective tariff rate of US is one thing, due to which we see that the fear of slower global growth and high inflation have not yet happened. हमें डर था कि inflation high हो जाएगा, global growth कम हो जाएगा, but ये उतना हुआ नहीं है क्योंकि यूएस का इफेक्टिव टैरिफ रेट कम है. आप समझिएगा, एक होता है एवरेज टैरिफ. एवरेज टैरिफ का मतलब हुआ कि आपने सिंपली सारे टैरिफ्स को ऐड कर दिया और उसका एवरेज निकाल लिया. तो अमेरिका का एवरेज टैरिफ पहुंच गया है 19%. बट ये इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है. एक होता है इफेक्टिव टैरिफ, कि अच्छा सभी अमेरिका जो सामान इंपोर्ट करते हैं, तो मान लीजिए मैं कोई सामान ज्यादा इंपोर्ट करता हूं, उसके ऊपर अगर मैं टैरिफ लगाऊंगा तो उसकी इफेक्टिवनेस ज्यादा होगी. एंड इफ आई इंपोर्ट समथिंग लेसर and I put tariff on that, then effectiveness of that will be relatively lesser. So the effective tariff of America is only 9.6%. ये तो ट्रंप अपना ढोल बजाते हैं कि मैंने ऐसा किया वैसा किया, बट अब जैसे मैं एक एग्जांपल देता हूं आपको, आप समझेंगे. America has imposed 50% tariff on India, 50%, but they have not imposed any tariff on Indian electronics. They have not imposed any tariff on Indian pharmaceuticals much. तो नतीजा क्या हुआ है? Effective tariff on India is hardly 37.6%. That is the effective tariff on India. So that is what also is being observed. So that is one basic factor that we go by. Then the next thing that we see is they talk about फ्रंट लोडिंग. ये देखिए, ये रीजंस हैं, रीजंस ऑफ ग्लोबल स्टेबिलिटी इन स्पाइट ऑफ टैरिफ. टैरिफ लगने के बाद भी ग्लोबल ग्रोथ उतना नीचे नहीं गया, इन्फ्लेशन उतने बाहर आगे नहीं गए। एक कारण लोअर इफेक्टिव रेट, यूएस टैरिफ रेट। दूसरा फ्रंट लोडिंग ऑफ स्पेंडिंग बाय यूएस हाउस होल्ड्स। नाउ व्हाट इज दिस फ्रंट लोडिंग? लोगों ने एक्सपेक्ट किया था कि टैरिफ बढ़ेगा, तो लोगों ने पहले से ही खरीद के रख लिया। सो टैरिफ वॉज इम्पोज्ड इन अगस्त, इन जुलाई, बट पीपल हैड earlier ordered. So this year we are not facing the brunt. But if the tariffs continue next year, we will have the feel. India is poised there. Already textile के orders आने बंद हो गए हैं, toys के order आने बंद हो गए हैं, gems and jewelries के orders आने बंद हो गए हैं. Why? Last year, before tariffs were imposed, orders were placed and we could sell it. So we are not facing the brunt that much. But this year, if we are unable to reach a trade agreement with the United States, then our sellers will actually feel the pinch of the challenge. And then, of course, implementation delays. Earlier, Trump had said he will do it in April, then July, then August, then and so on. So that became a factor. Then advanced economies growth has been relatively restricted, but mind you, USA is growing decently. Inflation has remained high on advanced economies standard. Emerging market developing economies, the growth has been 4.4. India is one of them, but we are growing better. Inflation has been high in emerging markets, but in India it is lesser. तो इंडिया थोड़े मैक्रोइकोनॉमिकली अच्छी हालत में है, जहां ग्रोथ हमारा ज्यादा है और इन्फ्लेशन रिलेटिवली कम है. If we go further, अब सर्वे बोलते हैं that aggregates mask fragilities. Overall macroeconomics looks good, the aggregate looks good, but there are weaknesses within the economy. For example, Japan, which hardly had inflation, is experiencing inflation above 2%. American inflation target is 2%, but America for the last 3 years now consecutively is having inflation above 3%. America's fiscal deficit is 6%, unheard of. अमेरिका ने कभी नहीं सुना. 1980s में जब ऑयल शॉक्स लगे थे, 70s में, तब ऐसा हुआ था. Otherwise, Americans had never heard of a fiscal deficit of 6%. But Americans have a fiscal deficit of 6%. Americans have a debt to GDP ratio, total loans divided by GDP of the country, of more than 100%. America's GDP is $31 trillion and America's debt is $38 trillion. Unheard of. Again, dollar crashing in value against other currencies. Rupee of course crashed even more because of multiple correction factors. वो मैं आपको समझाऊंगा जब मैं आपको external sector सिखा रहा हूँ. Similarly, in Europe, we see that some countries like Italy or Greece or Spain, they have done well, but many others like even the powerhouse Germany, not that well. So what happens is macro सब कुछ फिर भी ठीक ठाक लग रहा है, अच्छा दुनिया ठीक चल रही है, दिक्कत नहीं है. But when you look into the micro structure, you see problems emerging. Look at China. अब क्यों इतने purges हो रहे हैं चाइना में? Because Xi Jinping knows that he's not giving his country economic growth and he's not getting a lot of traction. So the next best option is make it politically volatile and do actions there. So China has deflation. उनके यहाँ prices गिर रहे हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि commodities हैं, investment capacity hai, but there is nobody to purchase it because Americans are putting a lot of restrictions on Chinese commodity, and then the Chinese are now dumping their commodity all over the world. When I use the word dumping, I use it technically. It means that dumping ka matlab, I am selling my commodity at a lower value than even the cost of production. अगर मैं cost of production से भी कम करके अपनी commodity बेचूं तो उसे कहा जाए dumping. तो ये सर्वे बोलते हैं that right now we have a challenge. इसका नतीजा इंडिया को क्या भुगतना पड़ रहा है देखिए. You will see a lot of foreign portfolio investors leaving India. Why? One is global uncertainty. That is why they are leaving India. कभी कभी especially those of you who are writing interview, you may face a question that if India's GDP is good, if India's inflation is low, if India's fiscal deficit is good, if India's current account deficit is good, why are people leaving India, foreign investors? So survey gives an answer to that. Survey says, number one, FPIs are going away, foreign portfolio investors, because many countries in the world have not reduced their interest rate. Many countries in the world have not reduced their interest rate. That is one. So since many countries have not reduced their interest rate, it means that you have a basic challenge that global portfolio investors will go to those countries. तो चूंकि हमने अपना interest rate कम कर लिया, repo rate by RBI, और बहुत सारी कंट्रीज ने अपना रेपो रेट कम नहीं किया, इंटरेस्ट रेट कम नहीं किया, तो फॉरेन पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टर्स उन्हें चूज कर रहे हैं, नंबर वन. नंबर टू, देर इज ग्लोबल अनसर्टिनिटी, tariffs, wars, and so on. So many investors are going into gold, many investors are going into dollar, and that's another reason why FPI is flowing out of India. Another reason why FPI is flowing out of India is that Indian stock market took a big jump. अगर आपको याद हो, after the elections in 2024, in June first week, the Sensex had reached 71,000, and within 6 months it reached 85,000. तो इंडियन मार्केट ने मैसिव रिटर्न दिया था between June 24 to December 24, and this was approximately almost a 30% increase, 20% increase. But then after that it has stagnated, so the returns are not coming. Another reason why foreign portfolio investors, the financial investors, have gone out. And another reason why portfolio investors have gone out is because of the factor that Indian shares are now pretty highly valued compared to the earnings of the company, जिसे earnings per share कहा जाता है. तो portfolio investors देखते हैं कि जहां पर earnings per share कम है, if lesser earnings per share, तो chances बनते हैं that future value will rise. तो लोग सोचते हैं इस शेयर की वैल्यू बढ़ने वाली है, then they go and invest over there, that okay, future value will rise, let me invest there. In India, the earnings per share are at a very high value already, so unless Indian companies earn more, unless India has impact of more structural reforms felt, global uncertainties don't come down, जब तक ये सब नहीं होगा, we will see a portfolio outflow from India. Then survey also says that that if you look at the interest rate, ये policy rates हैं in emerging market and in advanced economies, तो हर जगह अगर आप देखें तो maximum जगह पे policy rates are pretty high. इंडिया में भी ये कुछ हायर एंड पे ही है, मेक्सिको इज एट 7, बट स्टिल when you look at the policy rates, it shows that at the moment they're showing a declining trajectory, but many of them are at a high level. Then if we there's another thing that survey says that पूरी दुनिया भर में fiscal policy expansionary है, जबकि inflation high है. It's normally not seen. अगर inflation high होता है तो fiscal policy को contractionary बनाया जाता है, but survey ये बताता है that fiscal policy is expansionary amidst weak growth and inflation. और इंडिया एंड ब्राजील को छोड़कर, ये प्रीलिम्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इंपॉर्टेंट है, दिमाग में रखोगे, that only India and Brazil have reached the primary deficit level which is pre-pandemic, कि जहां पैंडेमिक के पहले था प्राइमरी डेफिसिट, वहां पहुंच गए हैं. बाकी सभी देशों के प्राइमरी डेफिसिट अभी भी पैंडेमिक के पहले के लेवल पर नहीं आए. क्यों प्री पैंडेमिक इंपॉर्टेंट है? बिकॉज पैंडेमिक वाज द टाइम व्हेन एवरी कंट्री इंक्रीज्ड फिस्कल डेफिसिट, सो ऑटोमेटिकली एवरी कंट्री हैज टू पे मोर प्राइमरी डेफिसिट. रिमेंबर, फिस्कल डेफिसिट माइनस इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट, जब आप ये करते हैं तो आपको मिलता है प्राइमरी डेफिसिट. तो प्राइमरी डेफिसिट ये बताता है कि एक सरकार के खर्चे में से अगर उनके इंटरेस्ट ऑब्लिगेशन को निकाल दिया जाए फ्रॉम अ गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर, इफ वी रिमूव देयर इंटरेस्ट ऑब्लिगेशन, देन हाउ मच विल is the expenditure they are doing or deficit they have on their current system. And we see that pretty high. For majority of the world, Brazil and India have brought it under control, but majority of the world still has it at a very high level. देखिए, ये प्री पैंडेमिक लेवल था यूके में, अभी भी ये हाई है उससे. ऐसे ही यूएसए में ये था प्री पैंडेमिक लेवल, ये हाई है. पैंडेमिक में सभी कंट्रीज का ऊपर चला गया प्राइमरी डेफिसिट, बट हम लोग यहाँ कंपेयर कर रहे हैं प्री पैंडेमिक एंड देयर. सिमिलरली इफ यू लुक एट इटली, उनका सरप्लस था, अभी ये सरप्लस है लेकिन कम हो गया. जर्मनी को देखिए, सरप्लस था, अब तो डेफिसिट में है. सो दैट इज द आइडिया. अगर यहाँ देखेंगे आप तो ब्राजील ये कम हो गए प्री पैंडेमिक, इंडिया हम लोग कम हो गए. दैट्स गुड फिस्कल डिसिप्लिन. दैट्स अ मैक्रोइकोनॉमिक स्टेबल सिस्टम. Then survey also highlights that borrowing costs बढ़े हुए हैं long term. क्यों? Due to uncertainty. Investors worried हैं. तो अगर आप एक बॉन्ड निकालना चाहते हैं, अगर आप एक बॉन्ड निकालना चाहते हैं 20 साल के लिए, तो इन्वेस्टर्स बेचारे चिंता में फंस जाते हैं. वो कहते हैं 20 साल का बॉन्ड नहीं खरीदेंगे, बिकॉज हु नोज इकोनॉमी की क्या हालत होगी 20 साल के बाद. So investors are a worried lot at the moment because of the uncertainty that we see. So what is the result of that? आप सोचिए अमेरिका के 30 साल के जो बॉन्ड हैं वो भी 5% के ऊपर पे सेल हो रहे हैं. मतलब इंटरेस्ट रेट इतना हाई हो गया है. इससे क्या होता है, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को, जो रियल इन्वेस्टमेंट्स होंगे, फैक्ट्री, बिल्डिंग, हाउस, इसको डिस्करेजमेंट होता है, ग्लोबल ग्रोथ को नुकसान होता है. बिकॉज इफ बोरोइंग कॉस्ट्स रिमेन लो, only then we will have a possibility that people will invest more because investment costs become lesser. लेकिन ये नहीं हो रहा, तो ये भी एक चैलेंज है. एक और चीज लेकिन हुई है, ये मैं आपको आगे चलकर बताऊंगा, दैट इंडिया का जो बोरोइंग कॉस्ट है वो पहले अमेरिका से बहुत ऊपर होता था. कि लोग जब इंडियन बॉन्ड्स खरीदते थे तो बहुत हाई इंटरेस्ट मांगते थे बिकॉज इंडिया की रिस्क हाई मानी जाती थी. सो अर्लियर पीपल वुड डिमांड अ वेरी हाई interest on Indian bonds compared to American bonds. Now that spread between Indian and American bonds has reduced by 50%. Why? People are trusting India more with better fiscal deficit, inflation in control, current account deficit in control. इसीलिए आप देखेंगे Standard and Poor's, the credit rating agency, has upgraded India's credit rating. It's a big news because what does that do? Global investors को जब choose करना होगा फाइनली, तो ठीक है, इंडिया इज अ क्रेडिट लायबल कंट्री. हम पहले अनस्टेबल कैटेगरी में, लेस इन्वेस्टेबल कैटेगरी में थे, अब इन्वेस्टेबल कैटेगरी में आ गए हैं. सो दीज आर सम एडवांटेजेस आल्सो दैट वी हैव सीन. बट ओवरऑल द एफडीआई फ्लोज ग्लोबली हैव गॉन डाउन. सर्वे ये बताता है दैट यूनाइटेड नेशन कॉन्फ्रेंस फॉर ट्रेड एंड डेवलपमेंट के हिसाब से द एफडीआई फ्लोज हैव गॉन डाउन by 11% in 2024. Huge global uncertainty, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas war, Trump's tariffs, then interest rates high due to high inflation, uncertainty with respect to supply chain development, USA and China confrontation. So इसके वजह से नतीजा क्या, Houthi rebels bombing the Red Sea. So everybody is worried. So global FDI flows have come down. अगर कहाँ जा रहा है लेकिन वो FDI flow, तो अगर कहीं जा रहा है तो AI की तरफ जा रहा है. जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का सप्लाई चेन है वहां ये एफडीआई फ्लो जा रहा है. ये भी एक कारण है कि इंडियन मार्केट्स में पैसा उतना नहीं आ रहा. इंडिया डजंट हैव एन एआई स्टोरी. We don't still have any big company or any big marketing incentive on an AI company. So then investors are not choosing us at the moment. So AI is the real story. और यहाँ पर यह है कि अगर हम AI को हटा के बात करें तो FDI has fallen. लेकिन अगर AI को ले लें तो यूएस में जैसे ये 20% से एफडीआई बढ़ गया. लेकिन इफ एआई इज इग्नोर्ड देन एफडीआई इन यूएस increased by 1%. So you can understand the difference. If we ignore AI, then the FDI in US decreases by 1%. So that is the challenge that we have. सो ओवरऑल अगर आप पूछें कि इंडिया को क्या करना चाहिए इस प्रोसेस में, वन, इंडिया शुड वर्क ऑन इट्स, ये सर्वे हमें बताते हैं, दैट इज जियोपॉलिटिक्स जो है वो आउटकम्स को शेप कर रहे हैं. इसको सर्वे ने एक बॉक्स में एक्सप्लेन किया है, वो बोलते हैं इकोनॉमिक स्टेटक्राफ्ट. इकोनॉमिक स्टेटक्राफ्ट क्या है? डेलिबरेट यूज ऑफ इकोनॉमिक मीन्स टू अचीव स्ट्रेटेजिक एंड्स ऑफ फॉरेन पॉलिसी एंड नेशनल सिक्योरिटी. जैसे using tariff to achieve international relations objectives. ये economic statecraft है. That is what survey implies, that now countries are using economic statecraft. Or China using rare earth permanent magnet restricting its exports. Don't forget, Chinese restricted the exports of rare earth permanent magnet to achieve global dominance. Americans को रोका, Indians को परेशान किया. So that is using statecraft. So ये economic policy नहीं है. Economic policy is fiscal, monetary, trade, but this is statecraft. Statecraft is very old. जैसे सर्वे एक एग्जाम्पल देते हैं that एम्बार्गोज लगाए थे ग्रीस ने मेगारियन डिक्री लगाकर, मेगारिया एक सिटी स्टेट थी एंशियंट यूरोप में. सो मेगारिया was an ally of Sparta, एंड ग्रीस का झगड़ा था स्पार्टा, सॉरी एथेंस का झगड़ा था स्पार्टा से. तो एथेंस ने मेगारिया पे एक रेस्ट्रिक्शन लगा दिया दैट यू आर नॉट अलाउड टू कल्टिवेट द लैंड दैट यू आर कल्टिवेटिंग near the Athenian regions, and we won't allow you to trade in on that land. तो एथेंस ने ऐसा इसलिए नहीं किया था क्योंकि उनको ट्रेड से ऑब्जेक्शन था, वो स्पार्टा को हिट करना चाहते थे. सो दिस इज व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इवन टुडे इन द वर्ल्ड. तो सर्वे दो एग्जांपल देते हैं, एक मेगारियन डिक्री की और दूसरा रोमन एम्पायर्स ग्रेन प्रोविजनिंग सिस्टम. अब ये रोमन एम्पायर की ग्रेन प्रोविजनिंग सिस्टम क्या थी? That they used to have big citadels in which they would store grains, and those grains will then be distributed all over the kingdom. But they would make sure that if any other city state or any other colony of theirs tried dominating them or tried acting against them, they would reduce the supply of grains to them. So this is using statecraft. अब इतने पीछे ना भी जाएं, आप हाल फिलहाल में याद कीजिए, इंडिया की ही बात अगर करूं 50 साल पहले, the Americans used to supply wheat to us to have food security before Green Revolution. And in Vietnam War, when India tried opposing Vietnam War, Americans delayed the shipment of wheat. उन्होंने हमें बताया कि भाई खाना नहीं देंगे तुम्हें अगर तुम हमारे खिलाफ गए. So statecraft is or economic statecraft has been continuous. Even Arthashastra mentions it, that economic systems should be used for dominating the international relations, global mechanisms, and so on. So that is economic statecraft. ये नाम याद रखोगे और इसके definition को याद रखोगे, deliberate use of economic means to achieve strategic ends, because this can be a prelims possibility. Then of course we just 15 years ago we used to see globalization as a stabilizing force. Today globalization has become the threat. कंट्रीज ने एक दूसरे पे भरोसा किया था, सप्लाई चेन्स को इंटीग्रेट किया था, बट द नेट रिजल्ट टुडे इज दैट इट इज गोइंग डाउन एंड वी आर स्ट्रगलिंग ओवरऑल इन दिस ग्लोबल वर्ल्ड. लोगों ने ट्रस्ट किया कि चाइना कभी रोकेंगे नहीं अपने प्रोडक्शन को, और चाइना कभी डिस्टर्ब नहीं करेंगे दूसरे कंट्रीज को फॉर रेयर अर्थ परमानेंट मैग्नेट, एंड दे अलाउड चाइना टू develop the entire supply chain. Similarly, nobody had thought Americans will use tariff as a weapon, but that all is happening. So that is why we should get very careful that in such a world, how can we work and operate? Now, of course, why is this happening over the world? So survey 3 reason देते हैं. Ultra nationalism, and unnecessarily we believe that I am the superior race, I am the superior culture. तो हर culture में हर race में मूर्ख होते हैं. You see idiots everywhere, and those idiots believe that I am the superior one, others are inferior. But the point is, we are all Homo sapiens, like it or not, so our basic capabilities will be similar. Maybe some of us can be racially 1 feet tall, 6 inches taller, 6 inches shorter, but it doesn't make a major difference. But then Hitler has died, Hitlerism has not. So that is one. Another is skepticism towards free trade and multilateralism. इसका कारण रहा क्योंकि with free trade and multilateralism, the world became very prosperous. 1991 में globalization की शुरुआत हुई. Till 2025, the globalization has gone on. In the last 35 years, global GDP has gone up from $25 trillion to $105 trillion. So, globe has become rich. Countries have become rich. जैसे ट्रम्प बोलते हैं ना, make America great again. American GDP was $8 trillion in 1991. It is $31 trillion today. So there's nothing to make America great again. They're already doing great. But the distribution has not been even. So there are many people who have been left behind in this fast pace of growth, and that creates the challenge of multilateralism and free trade. And then global rules are missing on competition, investment and subsidies. ऐसा सोचा गया था that WTO, IMF, they will become the multilateral institutions to work as a legal umpire. But umpire जो थे वो skewed थे in favor of developed countries. So as India became relatively richer, China became relatively richer, we started opposing it. हमने बोलना शुरू किया भाई ये तो umpiring गलत कर रहे हैं आप. अब इनको लगा कि अरे अभी तक तो चोरी करके जीत रहे थे, अब जीत नहीं पाएंगे. तो अब आप देखेंगे ट्रम्प के जितने भी चेले चपाटे हैं, हार्वर्ड लुटनिक काइंड ऑफ, they would tell you that, oh, America is not gaining from globalization, and Europe has also not gained. So we should actually walk out of all this. Why? Because they had thought they will come in and they will beat us with all the wrong rules they had made. But then they realized that India or China is getting one up, Vietnam for that matter, South Korea. And now they don't want to play the game because they are losing. So that has been a challenge again. And then of course, COVID pandemic broke many things, because with the COVID pandemic, uh, the supply chains were damaged a lot. So we have to rework on supply chain resilience. But many countries learned the lesson that there can be a sudden situation when you can be running short of even the basic necessities. मैं आपको एक example देता हूँ. In April 2020, when China was in a complete lockdown, India was facing a situation where we did not have enough pharmaceutical ingredients, raw material, to make even paracetamol. So that is the challenge that many countries were worried about. कि भाई अब कल को ऐसा दिन देखेंगे तो कैसे काम चलेगा? So every country, is in that backward mode that let's try becoming self-sufficient in strategic things like semiconductors, AI, renewables, EVs, critical minerals. और दो terms सर्वे ने use किया, friend shoring and near shoring. So friend shoring means outsource production. That is friend shoring. Outsource production to a friendly country. Outsource production to a friendly country. और near shoring का क्या मतलब हुआ? Outsource production to a country which is geographically close. तो जैसे अगर अमेरिका को आउटसोर्स करना है तो मेक्सिको में कर दें, दैट इज नियर शोरिंग. या अमेरिका को अगर आउटसोर्स करना है तो साउथ कोरिया को कर दें फ्रेंड शोरिंग, जो मेरे दोस्त हैं या जो मेरे पास हैं. सो आउटसोर्स द प्रोडक्शन सो दैट पीपल शुड नॉट वेपनाइज ट्रेड. ऐसा ना हो जाए कि कल को ट्रेड वेपन की तरह यूज कर लें और मैं नीचे रह जाऊं. देन वी गो फर्दर. The economic statecraft, as the survey says, operates through carrots and sticks. तो carrot मतलब incentives. भाई मैं तुम्हें बिजनेस दूंगा, मैं तुम्हारे लोगों को नौकरी दूंगा, मैं तुमसे ट्रेड डील साइन करूंगा. और sticks means मैं तुम पे टैरिफ लगा दूंगा, मैं तुम्हारे लोगों को अपने यहाँ नौकरी करने नहीं आने दूंगा. So when Trump says I will impose tariff, I will reduce H1B visa, I will remove the immigrants, that's stick. And when Trump says, oh, those who deal with me will get America's market and I will also be investing in your country, that's carrot. Now, as I told you, Americans are using export controls on advanced semiconductors. Chinese imposed restriction on rare earth. European Union has introduced the carbon border adjustment management tax, and fiscal policy of many countries, are about making sure that, okay, I have to balance my defense production. तो वहाँ fiscal policy बढ़ानी पड़ेगी, fiscal expenditure. Green energy को promote करना है, fiscal expenditure बढ़ाना पड़ेगा. लेकिन साथ में markets को control में रखना है, शांत रखना है. Stability in the financial market is important. तो fiscal deficit कम भी रखना है. So the countries are facing this amazing challenge that on one hand they need to have high fiscal deficit because they need to create social security, they need to create green energy, they need to do defense expenditure. On the other, they need to control fiscal deficit because they can't afford very high fiscal deficit because the markets will respond negatively. लोग आपके यहाँ से पैसे निकालने लग जाएंगे. तो इस dilemma में बहुत countries रह रही हैं, and that is again pushing the world towards inward looking policies and not interacting with each other and so on. So what should India do? One, India should pursue strategic indispensability. Global value chains में इंडिया कुछ ऐसा इंपॉर्टेंट प्लेस ले ले, जैसे सेमीकंडक्टर का कोई इंपॉर्टेंट प्लेस, रेयर अर्थ का कोई इंपॉर्टेंट प्लेस, और समथिंग रिलेटेड टू अ स्ट्रैटेजी. इंडियन ओशियन में इंपॉर्टेंट लेवल पोजीशन बनाना, हिमालयस के पास इंपॉर्टेंट पोजीशन बनाना. समथिंग इंडिया विल हैव टू डू so that India can create a choke point for the world, the way you will see Chinese created the choke point for rare earth. So we are trying to develop indigenous AI, indigenous large language models, indigenous chip manufacturing. So in the next 10-15 years, India is trying that A, we should have enough production capacity within home, but B, equally importantly, we should be a larger participant in the global market. इसीलिए याद रखना, again जो लोग इंटरव्यू दे रहे हो तो बिल्कुल याद रखना, आत्मनिर्भर भारत is not about protectionism. Atmanirbhar Bharat is about this, having an important position in global supply chain. We are not discouraging exports, we are not discouraging FDI, and we are not discouraging imports. What we are only saying is, whatever we can produce well, we should produce well. Why should we buy mirrors from China? भाई अपना मिरर हम खुद क्यों नहीं बना सकते? Why should we buy our god statues, गणेश जी, विष्णु जी, शिव जी, from China? ये तो हमें बनाना चाहिए. चाइनीज तो कम्युनिस्ट हैं, वो एथिस्ट होते हैं, पूजा भी नहीं करते हमारे भगवान की. तो ये इंडिया का की कोशिश है that whatever India can do properly, that we try doing. And then how are we trying it? इंडस्ट्री के चैप्टर में मैं आपको ये पढ़ाऊंगा भी कि स्टेप्स क्या लिए गए हैं. तो ये है स्ट्रेंथनिंग डोमेस्टिक कैपेबिलिटीज. ऑलराइट. और साथ में जो ग्लोबल रूल्ड ऑर्डर है, इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले कीजिए उसमें. इसीलिए स्ट्रेटेजिकली इंडिपेंडेंट रहना जरूरी है. इफ वी आर सीन एज एन एलाई ऑफ यूएसए or ally of China, we will not be able to play a strategically independent role. So in that global world order, we need to have a strategically independent role. अब डोमेस्टिक इकोनॉमी में क्या हो रहा है? पहला, 7.4% GDP and 7.3% GVA growth is the annual production in the first advanced estimates. So we are the fastest growing economy, fourth consecutive year. और सर्वे ये बोलते हैं that growth is demand driven, consumption is rising at 7%, investment capital formation is rising at 7%, rising. तो consumption growth 7% है, capital formation का growth 7% है. So definitely we are doing well. Services remain the main driver. Service sector is growing at 9% in India, fastest again, and that is a big driver of growth in India. मैंने आपको ये टेबल दिया है सर्वे से, ये आप ध्यान में रख लेंगे. The growth of agriculture growth rate is 3.1% this year, so it is slower than last year. ये प्रीलिम्स में पूछते हैं, याद रखोगे हमेशा. और अगर आंसर भी लिख रहे हो मेंस में तो ये अच्छा काम आता है. Agricultural growth has slowed down. Last year it was 4.6, this year 3.1. Well, this year it has been, this year means 24-25, 25-26. This year it has been less, A, because of a high base effect, B, also because the price of agricultural goods have come down. तो price का impact पड़ रहा है growth rate पर. Output उतना ही है, ज़्यादा ही हुआ है, but prices have come down, so the value looks smaller. Then, of course, mining and quarrying. Last year was 5.9, this year is 6.2. Manufacturing last year was, the real growth was 2.7. This year is minus 0.7. Sorry, mining and quarrying is 2.7 and minus 0.7. And manufacturing 4.5 and 7. But again, ध्यान रखिएगा, high manufacturing growth. अच्छा, पहले एक बात बता दूं. Low mining and quarrying growth is for two reasons. One, the reason is environmental challenges due to which many mines have had to be closed. Second, heavy monsoon this year which restricted mining work. And third, less demand in the global market. So these are the reasons that mining and quarrying has grown lesser. On the other hand, manufacturing has grown at a higher pace relatively. One reason has been low base effect. Second reason is some of the structural reforms working. So sectors like defense, toys, sectors like electronics, we have done better. But एक और कारण है, इनपुट के प्राइसेस कम रहे हैं, आउटपुट का प्राइस ज्यादा रहा है. तो हम वैल्यू एडिशन चेक करते हैं, आउटपुट माइनस इनपुट वैल्यू. सो इफ इनपुट प्राइसेस हैव रिमेन्ड लो and output prices have gone up, the difference between output value and input value looks higher. So manufacturing has benefited because of that. Value addition looks higher. Electricity, gas, water supply and utilities have been lesser. Construction has been lesser, and that again is because of the high base effect and also because some of the government projects have at the moment been delayed. Services have grown the fastest among all the sectors. Manufacturing has 6.2, agriculture 3.1, services 9.1. So services have been the fastest growing sector, and within services we see finance, real estate and professional service 9.9, and public administration, defense and other service 9.9. So these are the two major contributors. अगर expenditure method से देखें तो household consumption growing at 7% and investments growing at 7.8%. Gross fixed capital formation are the two prime drivers of growth. So just keep that in mind. Our export growth is almost similar. Government expenditure इस साल ज़्यादा लग रहा है, but वो पिछले साल कम था. उसका कारण थे elections. In 2025, government expenditure looked less because of elections. Then अच्छा एक ध्यान रखना, this number 15.2, 24.3, 51.1, it doesn't add up to 100%. ये share of agriculture, industry and services है, but it doesn't add up to 100% because the survey has left few of the places where these were overlapping. For example, dealership of a manufacturer. तो dealership is services, manufacturer is manufacturing. How do you judge that? तो survey ने उसको ignore कर दिया है, तो इसीलिए ये 100 add up नहीं हो रहा. Otherwise, this is the broad parameter. Generally speaking, this is 16%, this is 28%, and this is 56%. Exam point of view से तुम ये बात याद रख सकते हो. Similarly, consumption is the biggest driver. 61.5% of GDP in India is consumption. Government's consumption expenditure is 9.9%, only consumption expenditure. इसमें गवर्नमेंट का इन्वेस्टमेंट एडेड नहीं है. जब हम लोग इंडिया में इन्वेस्टमेंट ऐड करते हैं तो गवर्नमेंट प्लस प्राइवेट यहाँ होता है. 30% ऑफ जीडीपी इज गवर्नमेंट प्लस प्राइवेट. इसमें ब्रेकअप कुछ ऐसा है, 20% अराउंड इज प्राइवेट and 10% around is government. Within private, approximately 12% is corporate and 8% is residential construction. So this is the distinction. This is the distinction that we look at. Okay, then we go further. We now check this across. So when we talk about the next part, the demand side, domestic drivers, यहाँ पर भी कुछ बातें ध्यान में रखोगे. This I have already told you that the share of PFC has gone up and macroeconomic environment has been supportive. ध्यान क्या रखना है, that average growth of our private final consumption expenditure has been 6.9% in the last 2 years. This year it has jumped to 7.5. So that is again an improvement. अगर हम 2014 में चले जाएं, the private final consumption expenditure would be 56.6%. This goes to 60.7%. So this is the basic average growth here. Then if we go further, we see that automobile, tractor sales, air passenger traffic, ये सब सर्वे बोलता है showing robust demand. NABARD के जो household consumption survey हैं shows robust demand. So if somebody asks you a question, how does demand side look in the economy? Survey is saying that rural consumption has picked up, urban consumption is picking up, and the indicators are showing relatively faster and higher demand for us. Next. Where is that? This one? Okay, thank you. Okay, then the survey also says that investments have gone up. Investment share is 30% of GDP. You know, investment share is 30% of GDP. तो अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट का शेयर हम रखें एज 30% ऑफ जीडीपी, अगेन यू नो उसमें एक चीज आती है, सर्वे तो खैर सरकार के पब्लिकेशन है, अपनी बात करते हैं, बट इंडिया हैड रीच्ड एन इन्वेस्टमेंट शेयर ऑफ 35% ऑफ जीडीपी, 35% mind you, way back in 2012, and after that the investment share started declining and it reached very low. Survey gives us a number. See, we had a 35% in 2012. The investment share kept declining and there was a point when it became around 28% of GDP. ये तो पैंडेमिक था खैर, तो मैं 21 को उतना इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दे रहा, it was a pandemic year, but see here the investment share was very low. क्यों? Because of the NPA problem in India, twin deficit issue. Also because of corporate sector heavily leveraged, demand very low. So 2016, 17, 18 were tough years. We were having that. तो वहां से ये revive कर गया है वापस. We see that the investment share is now again touching 30%. Prelims के point of view से क्या याद रखोगे? Investment share in India was 35 in 2012, then fell down and has again been rising. And in the last 3-4 years, it has remained almost constant. और सर्वे बोलते हैं that we see that capital goods imports are also rising in India, और apart from food, the loan taken for non-food purposes is also rising. All that shows some robust investment growth. Exports, they say that the share is expected to be 21.6%, but we know very well that exports are in trouble at the moment because of the global situation. So I don't see exports playing a big role in India's development in the near future. If we sign an agreement with USA, the situation will change. But if we don't sign an agreement with USA, the situation might remain a little volatile. But yes, one thing is that with exports, we can expect that over the period, if India diversifies its market, जैसे हम try कर रहे हैं, free trade agreement with Oman, New Zealand, Australia, UAE, Mauritius, and so on, European Union, UK. So if India can diversify, we have a lot of scope. I can tell you that. Then, अच्छा इसमें एक बात और ध्यान रखिएगा that इंडिया का एवरेज एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ 2.5% था इनिशियली, पिछले 5 साल का जो रहा है, और इस साल का एवरेज एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ 5.9% रहा है. सो द एवरेज एक्सपोर्ट ग्रोथ हैज बीन अबव द ट्रेंड इन लास्ट फ्यू ईयर्स. एंड सर्वे ऑप्टिमिस्टिक हैं, वो कहते हैं that अगर ट्रेड डील हो गया यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स से तो एक्सपोर्ट्स विल रिमेन रिजिलियंट. मैं उतना ऑप्टिमिस्टिक नहीं हूँ. आई डोंट थिंक ट्रेड डील इतनी आसानी से होगा यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के साथ. आई होप आई एम प्रूवन रॉन्ग, ईश्वर करे मैं गलत हो जाऊं, बट जो मैं हालत देख रहा हूँ, आई डोंट सी अ ट्रेड डील अपियरिंग सो सून विद यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. सो वी शुड ब्रेस अप दैट एक्सपोर्ट्स वोंट बी अ बिग फैक्टर हेल्पिंग अस. हमें डोमेस्टिक फैक्टर्स पे काम करना ही पड़ेगा. देन द सर्वे ऑल्सो सेज दैट नाउ इंडिविजुअल सेक्टर्स पे अगर आ जाए, they said agriculture played a stabilizing role, but ये पूरी तरह सही नहीं है. एग्रीकल्चर ग्रोथ ठीक रहा है, लेकिन चैलेंज ये रहा है that in spite of a good monsoon and in spite of good efforts by people, we have seen agricultural growth rate declining because A, we are not mechanizing agriculture faster. B, there is a lot of disguised unemployment in agriculture, we are not able to correct it. C, farmers are still growing low value product like wheat and rice more than the high value product like oil seeds and pulses. And D, we are still not doing institutional reforms in agriculture like credit, marketing, storage and so on. So जब तक ये नहीं करेंगे, अब देखिए हमारा agricultural growth 3.6% पे है, which is lower than the average 4.5 that has been recorded in India. So this is something, again, survey is pretty optimistic, but I told you 4 reasons why agriculture has not done as great as what we would have liked it to be. और आप देखेंगे that livestock still does better consistently. Cropping has not done that well, तो इसका कारण वही है that हम बहुत सारा राइस और wheat produce कर रहे हैं. We are not producing sufficient oil seeds, pulses, high value crops like fruits, vegetables, etc. Flowers, we should be going in that direction. और साथ में एग्रीकल्चर का चैलेंज है, मैकेनाइजेशन नहीं है, प्रोडक्टिविटी की कमी है इसीलिए, एंड फार्मर्स को एक्सटेंशन सर्विसेज नहीं है जैसे मार्केटिंग सपोर्ट, वेदर रिपोर्ट सपोर्ट एंड ऑल. लाइफ स्टॉक, इफ यू लुक एट इट, आवर डेयरी सेक्टर हैज डन वेल, 6.5% growth. Our fishery sector has done well, 7% growth. Poultry, 7.2% growth. So the allied activities have done well, but cropping has not done that well. अब सर्वे एक बात लिखते हैं, मैं आपको एक्सप्लेन करता हूं. इंडस्ट्री में देयर इज अ कंसर्न ओवर इंडस्ट्रीज डिक्लाइनिंग जीवीए शेयर. ऑलराइट, कि इंडस्ट्री का ग्रॉस वैल्यू एडेड एट बेसिक प्राइस में शेयर कम क्यों हो रहा है. भाई कुछ लोग आपसे सवाल पूछेंगे कि ऐसा क्यों है कि इंडस्ट्रियल शेयर इन जीडीपी इज फॉलिंग. तो सर्वे ये बोलते हैं कि दैट इज ड्यू टू मोर प्राइस इफेक्ट. हो क्या रहा है, सर्विस सेक्टर इज ग्रोइंग फास्टर with services becoming more costly. Industry is not growing that fast because the prices are not rising that fast. साथ में in many cases in industry the challenges जो ये हमें लिख के देते हैं, higher intermediate consumption. So what happens is, if crude oil prices rise suddenly, if steel prices rise, if aluminum prices rise, then my intermediate consumption becomes more and that can result in lesser industrial activity. लेकिन ये भी तब होता है जब मेरी इंडस्ट्रीज रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट पे काम नहीं कर रही, इनोवेशन ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी ठीक से नहीं कर रही. इफ माई इंडस्ट्रीज बिकम एफिशिएंट, they will automatically cut down on intermediate goods, productivity will rise, capital will become more efficient, and we will get better returns. So industry is a point where India should take care of its product possibilities. Industry is a point where India should focus better. क्या focus करना है? Labor market reforms, let's implement it faster. Land acquisition, make it easier. Capital market, make it possible for companies to issue bonds and encourage it among people to buy bonds of the companies and they can grow better. तब कंपनीज को बैंक्स के कॉस्टलियर इंटरेस्ट रेट पे डिपेंडेंट नहीं रहना पड़ेगा. सिमिलरली इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टू बी मेड बेटर इन द लोकल रीजन्स. तो अगर हम ये करेंगे तो इंडस्ट्रियल रिफॉर्म्स होंगे जो इंडस्ट्री का कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन कम करेंगे. एंड इफ द कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन कम्स डाउन, automatically industry rises faster. So this is again something that survey is not telling you, but I thought I should let you know. Survey says in real terms, manufacturing share has remained steady at 17. That's true. Manufacturing share has remained steady at 17-18%. But in a country where 46% workers are in agriculture, I think it's high time that we focus on manufacturing more. India has a lot of potential. We can put textile units, leather goods, soft, toys, food processing, uh, you know, footwear. Similarly, things like furniture. ये मीडियम स्केल इंडस्ट्रीज हो सकती हैं रूरल एरिया, सेमी रूरल एरिया में. इफ वी क्रिएट रूरल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड स्किल डेवलपमेंट अमंग वर्कर्स. आज हमारे 9 करोड़ वर्कर्स लैंडलेस एग्रीकल्चरल लेबर है. अगर हम इन 9 करोड़ वर्कर्स को लैंडलेस एग्रीकल्चरल लेबर की कैटेगरी से हटाकर इंडस्ट्रियल वर्कर्स के फॉर्म में ट्रेन कर पाए, यू कैन इमेजिन द कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन फॉर इंडस्ट्री विल कम डाउन. These workers today are getting 4-5,000 rupees per month as landless agricultural labor. If we will give them even 9-10,000 per month as industrial labor, they will work better, they will earn better, and economy is more productive. So focus should be here. Survey gets a missing link, तो मैंने सोचा मैं वो fill कर दूं. Survey चर्चा नहीं करते उस बात की, but I think you should know about that. Then we see that in services sector, the growth has been tremendous. And now the share of services in GDP is touching 54 odd %, passing the pre-pandemic level. And also we see that certain sectors which are now contact oriented, like trade, hospitality, transport, are growing at a relatively lesser pace, क्योंकि इनमें अभी भी supply chain disrupted है. But other services like administration and lawyers, doctors, coaching centers, beauty salons, spa, these are again back to the pre-pandemic situation. Then we see further that survey has given you, I've given you the box, you can read through that now we are trying to strengthen the national statistical system. So we are trying to get a new data series for GDP from February 2026. We have revised the base year to 2023-24 for GDP collection. We are going to get a new series for CPI. We are changing the weights also in it. We are going to get a new series for index of industrial production. Plus survey ये बोलते हैं कि हम टेक्नोलॉजी यूज करके ऑल इंडिया सर्वे फॉर अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस, ये ऑलरेडी सर्विस सेक्टर में जो अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड हैं उनका डेटा हमने कलेक्ट करना शुरू कर दिया है एनुअल बेसिस पे पिछले 2 साल से. PLFS डेटा जो है, पीरियोडिक लेबर फोर्स सर्वे डेटा, वो अब हर महीने रिलीज हो रहा है. सर्वे बोलते हैं हम IIP का डेटा भी रिवाइज करके कैलकुलेट करेंगे. साथ में वी विल यूज द immediate response indicators, the high frequency indicators, to give us better results of what is actually happening in the economy. So the policy making will become robust only when we know better about the economy. यहाँ मेरी बस सरकार से यही प्रार्थना है कि सेंसस भी कंप्लीट कर दें भाई. सेंसस काफ़ी डिलेड है. I hope we will complete census faster and quickly so that we have more clarity on many programs in the system. सर्वे कहते हैं कि अब हम GST का डेटा भी यूज करेंगे. इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर के ऊपर अलग से भी एक सर्वे किया जाएगा. सो वी विल हैव मोर इंफॉर्मेशन and that is about improving the data mechanism, which is good in a world which is very disrupted. It's good to have at least the knowledge of database. Then survey says domestic macroeconomic fundamentals are fine. जो CPI है वो पिछले लगातार 4-5 महीने से it is below 2%. That is the minimum number of minimum inflation that RBI targets. but उसका मेजर कारण है फूड डिसइन्फ्लेशन. वेजिटेबल्स में, पल्सेस में एट द मोमेंट बिकॉज ऑफ इंपोर्ट्स, बिकॉज ऑफ फार्म इंटरवेंशंस, जैसे इस बार अनियन, टमेटो का प्राइस नहीं बढ़ा. क्यों? गवर्नमेंट मेड NAFED परचेज दीज क्रॉप्स और फिर टाइम आने पे NAFED ने इनको रिलीज कर दिया. सो नॉर्मली क्या होता था, अनियन, टमेटो, पोटैटो, these crops would keep growing till March. Then after March, April maximum, the supply stopped coming. And April, May, June, the supply remained. Then due to monsoon, the supply used to get disrupted and price would rise tremendously in July, August, September. सरकार ने इस बार क्या किया? नेशनल एग्रीकल्चरल मार्केटिंग फेडरेशन, NAFED, स्टेट एग्रीकल्चरल मार्केटिंग फेडरेशंस, इनके थ्रू some crops were procured earlier and they were really so that, and they were stored. Food processing was developed, and then these crops were released in July, August, September. तो फूड प्राइसेस कंट्रोल में रहे, ये एक बहुत अच्छा काम किया है सरकार ने, और इसके वजह से इन्फ्लेशन ओवरऑल रिमेन्ड under control. Of course, good monsoon helped, no doubt. Core inflation, that is CPI minus food and fuel. core inflation कैसे calculate करते हैं? Consumer price index inflation minus food inflation minus fuel inflation. Core inflation has remained above 4%, but it is mainly due to high price of gold and silver. अगर मैं gold और silver निकाल दूं उनका price increase, then core inflation is 3.6%. So inflation is pretty benign. Even the future looks benign because GST has been reduced, and we also see, so that will create lesser price in the market. Rabi crops, we see heavy sowing, so we expect a better Rabi crop this year. Also we see that overall supply capacity has increased with infrastructure support and all. So inflation, RBI says, will remain under control, and survey also replicates the same. So this is the trend in CPI inflation and their components. Then of course fiscal policy. So we see that government has at the moment kept its spending proper. RBI survey बोलते हैं that revenue mobilization is strong. In fact, survey is categorically stating that government will be able to meet its fiscal deficit target. They are saying that by November, 54% of tax revenue which had been targeted was already mobilized. The survey also says that expenditures have been calibrated, but इसकी सच्चाई हमें कल पता चल जाएगी जब बजट आएगा. और कल मैं आपके साथ एक सेशन करूंगा 6 बजे. मैं होऊंगा, रेड्डी जी होंगे और बी सिंह जी होंगे. वी विल बी डूइंग अ बियॉन्ड क्लासरूम विथ यू at 6 p.m. in the evening tomorrow. You can tune in to that. And beyond classroom के बाद in the classroom आपको मैं पढ़ाऊंगा on 2nd of February. You will get the notification. I'm planning it on 2nd of February, the discussion on budget. All right, and then we will come back to economic survey. एक बार मैं budget खत्म कर लूंगा तो वापस economic survey पे आ जाऊंगा. But I will complete both of them as every year I do. Coming back then, the gross tax, as I said, gross tax revenues where direct taxes are already 53% of annual target. Tax reforms की वजह से the consumption has been boosted. So overall central government's fiscal path looks fine. The capital expenditure share has risen from 12.5% to 22.6%. इसको बोलते हैं good quality fiscal expenditure. Effective capex का मतलब होता है central government capital expenditure plus the loan and grant given by central government to state government for capital expenditure. तो जो central government का capital expenditure है उसमें जब आप स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को जो लोन देती है सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट और ग्रांट्स देती है कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर करने को, उसे ऐड कर देते हैं तो उसे इफेक्टिव कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर कहा जाता है. तो सर्वे कहते हैं दैट हैज आल्सो इंक्रीज्ड टू 4% फ्रॉम 2.6%. ये डेटा पॉइंट्स आप ध्यान में रखेंगे. अगेन फ्रॉम प्रीलिम्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इट विल बी इंपॉर्टेंट. So and they say central is on target of achieving 4.4%. नतीजा क्या रहा है? जैसा मैंने आपको बता रखा है ऑलरेडी. The reflecting credibility means S&P ratings have upgraded us. CareEdge Global assigned a BB plus rating, and markets have rewarded this discipline. Even Japanese, credit rating agency Ritwain has given us a stable indicator rating. So India's bonds are becoming more and more acceptable even in the foreign market क्योंकि हमारा fiscal discipline relatively maintained है. Then if we look at monetary policy and transmission, पिछले एक साल में हमने काफी मॉनेटरी एक्सपेंशन किया है. क्या क्या मॉनेटरी एक्सपेंशन किया? CRR कट से वी हैव इन्फ्यूज्ड 2.5 लाख करोड़, ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशन से 6.95 लाख करोड़ एंड फॉरेक्स स्वैप से $25 बिलियन. फॉरेक्स स्वैप क्या है? आई विल गिव यू डॉलर एंड टेक रूपी फ्रॉम यू टुडे. इन फ्यूचर I will give you back the rupee and take dollar. But when I give you dollar and take rupee, that rupee comes into my market and increases money supply. Why am I giving you dollar? I am trying to stabilize my currency. It increases the supply of dollar in the market, and that means the currency depreciation can be relatively less volatile. Then of course we say that transmission has been effective. The weighted aggregate lending rate has on rupee loans has fallen by 59 basis points and on outstanding loan by 69 basis point. तो जो लोन नए दिए जा रहे हैं उन पे भी 59 बेसिस पॉइंट से कम है, और जो पुराने लोन है उन पे 69 बेसिस पॉइंट से कम हो गया है। तो हमने रेपो रेट कम किया 1.25% से, और लोन्स कम हो गए हैं करीब 0.69% से। दैट्स अ गुड इनफ ट्रांसमिशन गोइंग टू द इकोनॉमी। फायदा क्या होगा? लोन्स सस्ते होंगे, और जैसे लोन्स सस्ते होंगे, एज द लोन्स बिकम चीपर, इट विल बिकम ईजियर in the economic system for people to then borrow more, spend more, and consumption and investments will pick up, helping us in GDP growth. Then, of course, that is the chart of overall flow of financial resources. If you look at external sector, ये important है आपके exam point of view से। Our exports last year were $825 billion. इसमें $437 billion is goods exports and $388 billion is service export. तो ये आप ध्यान रख लेंगे। Exports have been resilient. Americans have put a tariff, but this year our export has still risen by 2.4% and service exports by 6.5%. So we see that till April to December, the exports have shown a rising trend. But again, I repeat, जो मैंने शुरुआत में बोली क्लास के, that this rising trend is also because people front loaded expenditure. अगले साल असली असर पता चलेगा हमें, अभी पता उतना नहीं चल रहा। अच्छी बात क्या रही? जो जो गुड्स का ट्रेड है, मर्केंडाइज ट्रेड बैलेंस, एक्सपोर्ट ऑफ गुड्स माइनस इंपोर्ट ऑफ गुड्स, देयर आवर इंपोर्ट्स आर मच मोर देन एक्सपोर्ट्स, बट our services imports are much lesser than goods import, services export, and our inflow of remittance is much more. तो इन सब को मिलाकर जो करंट अकाउंट होता है बीओपी का, उसमें आप क्या क्या लेते हैं? एक्सपोर्ट माइनस इंपोर्ट ऑफ गुड्स, एक्सपोर्ट माइनस इंपोर्ट ऑफ सर्विसेज, inflow of remittance minus outflow of remittance, and factor income from abroad minus factor income to abroad. इन चार components से बनता है current account. In India at the moment, the current account deficit is at 0.8%, which is more than manageable given that we have $700 billion of foreign exchange reserves, and also that we have some capital flows which are happening. Even though इस साल एक बात रही that capital outflow ज़्यादा हुआ है, तो हमें अपने foreign exchange reserve से निकाल कर BOP deficit meet करना पड़ा. So $6.4 billion we had to give out of foreign exchange reserves because the BOP was in deficit, because current account was in deficit and capital also flew outwards. तो हमें कुछ पैसे जेब से निकाल के देने पड़े. All right, then FDI inflows rose 16.1% year on year. ये ग्रॉस एफडीआई है. ग्रॉस एफडीआई का मतलब होता है द न्यू इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कमिंग टू इंडिया, existing companies reinvesting their profit in India, and existing company giving a loan to its subsidiary in India. ये तीन चीज मिलाकर जब हम ऐड करते हैं तो वो ग्रॉस एफडीआई होता है. उसमें से जब आप माइनस कर देते हैं कंपनीज सेंडिंग देयर प्रॉफिट बैक टू देयर कंट्री एंड इंडियन कंपनीज इन्वेस्टिंग अब्रॉड, तो वो नेट एफडीआई होता है. तो ग्रॉस एफडीआई क्या हुआ? न्यू इन्वेस्टमेंट बाय फॉरेन कंपनीज इन इंडिया, existing foreign companies reinvesting their profit in India, and existing foreign companies giving loans to their subsidiaries in India. इसमें से जब माइनस करते हैं existing foreign companies sending their profit abroad and Indian companies spending abroad, तो वो net FDI होता है. Net FDI this year has grown at a very small rate for a reason that due to global uncertainty, many companies are taking their money abroad. Also, many Indian companies, startups have brought their IPO like a Lenskart or and so on. So these IPOs imply that जिन लोगों ने पहले इन्वेस्ट किया था इनमें, the venture capitalists and angel investors, foreigners, they now found a place where this IPO was being launched and they were getting good returns on their investment. They have taken it abroad. It's not bad news, it's okay. It shows to the investors abroad, आप इंडिया में पैसा लगाइए, आप पैसा बाहर भी ला सकते हैं, नहीं रोकेगा कोई. तो फ्यूचर में भी लोग पैसा लगाएंगे. लेकिन इसमें एक गलती हमने कर रखी है, आई होप हम इसे सुधारें. Our long-term capital gains tax at 12.5% puts a hefty pressure on foreign capital investors, and that's becoming one reason why portfolio investors and FDI is slowing also. But gross FDI has been continuously growing, which shows people globally are enthusiastic about India. If India can do better policies, we can do much better. Of course, rupee has depreciated amid this uncertainty. and forex resources are sufficient to cover more than 11 months of import and all loans that we have taken. So survey expects that with trade diversification and all, we should do well, new FTAs that we have signed and new investments that will flow in. So survey is expecting that we should be doing pretty well on that. Then of course एम्प्लॉयमेंट के ऊपर बातचीत की. अच्छा एक बात और ध्यान रखोगे सब लोग, इन सभी चीज़ों पे जो इंडिविजुअल चैप्टर्स हैं वो बहुत डिटेल में बात करूंगा मैं, बिकॉज वो इंडिविजुअल चैप्टर्स आर इंपॉर्टेंट. ऑलराइट, ये सर्वे ने एक बस ओवरव्यू दिया है एंड द चैप्टर्स बिकम इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज देन it takes us into depth and analysis over there. So labor market has improved, supported by regulatory reforms like labor law that we have now implemented, wider social protection and skilling initiatives. PLFS का जो डेटा है वो शो करता है declining unemployment. True. If we see according to PLFS data, periodic labor force survey, unemployment was 5%, rose to 5.4%, is now in the zone of 4.9%, the unemployment rate. But एक बात ध्यान रखिएगा, इंडिया में unemployment measurement की जाती है through usual status, जिसमें if you have worked for 1 month in the whole year, you are considered employed. So I repeat, जब मैं आपको unemployment chapter पढ़ाऊंगा तो I will be making it more specific, but India doesn't have a problem of unemployment as much as what it has of underemployment. Not getting regular job, not getting good quality job, not getting productivity enhancing job. That is a real challenge of India than only unemployment. So yes, unemployment rate looks lesser. Labor force participation is coming back to healthier levels, say around 56%, back to 55.8. So labor force participation looks better now. But यहाँ पर भी क्या है, women labor force participation is at the moment in India around 41%. But that when we add the non-paying household work done by the women, जैसे लकड़ी चुनना and so on, you know, picking up the firewood or going for fetching water, we add all that because 12% women are in this engagement. So women in paid work are only 29% labor force participation. That is, what is labor force participation rate? Number of people who are either working or looking for work. That is labor force participation rate. At the moment in India, it is around 56%. That's not so good news. 44% people are not even looking for work. That's not good news. I repeat again. Of course, with labor codes implemented, we can expect that better industrial demand should arise. Skilling programs have been good in India, industrial training institutes and all. जब मैं education chapter पढ़ाऊंगा, I'll get into detail there. We can expect that all can improve employment possibilities. The social sector initiatives have reduced poverty. World Bank के index के हिसाब से in 2011-12 we had 29.6% in poverty. That has come down to 5.3% extreme poverty. You know, तो वर्ल्ड बैंक इंडेक्स के हिसाब से देखें तो एक्सट्रीम पॉवर्टी जो है वो सिर्फ 5.3 में रह गई कंपेयर टू 29 इन 10-12 ईयर्स. और ये है लोअर मिडिल इनकम पॉवर्टी. ये क्या हुआ, यहाँ पे हम लेते हैं $3.6 to $5 per capita per day, and then the poverty rises to 23% of population. कहने का मतलब क्या है, if you take $2.1 to $3, then only 5% people are in poverty. But if you take $3.6, then 24% people are in poverty, which means हमारे यहाँ कुछ लोग poverty में नहीं हैं, लेकिन vulnerable group में अभी भी हैं. I repeat, in our country, some people are not in poverty, but they are still vulnerable because they are just above poverty, and that's around 24% of population, which means we need to make sure that we keep working on their well-being, training, skilling, upgradation of living standard, nutrition, so that we can make them sufficiently in a safe zone where they are not in the threat of going back into poverty. Then of course, the health and education indicators have all improved steadily. We'll go into that in the social sector. Now, what reforms and medium-term growth can we expect? First of all, manufacturing focused measures have been taken in the last 2-3 years. PLI schemes, FDI liberalization. We have allowed 100% FDI in railways, defense, now insurance last budget. So that has happened. And logistics reforms. What kind of logistical reforms? Like a national logistic policy, like a Gati Shakti portal. So yes, we have done these reforms, and then the effective capital expenditure at 4% of GDP. So overall capacity creation has become better. तो अगर आपसे कोई पूछेंगे व्हाई इज इंडियाज ग्रोथ हैपनिंग, इंटरव्यू वाले लोग भी और मेंस लिखोगे तब भी, दोनों इंपॉर्टेंट है, याद रखना. सो व्हाई इज इंडियाज ग्रोथ रेट राइजिंग? एक तो ये हो गया मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फोकस्ड मेजर्स, PLI, FDI लिबरलाइजेशन, लॉजिस्टिकल रिफॉर्म्स एंड इफेक्टिव कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर. दूसरा, सिंप्लीफाइंग टैक्स, दैट इज our income tax rates reduced, tax processes simplified, GST simplified, and improving regulatory clarity. With the income tax bill of August 2025 act rather, so making it regulatorily clearer. MSME support has been given with easier loans using, this is trade receivables and electronic discounting system. इसमें क्या होता है, if I am an MSME, कोई मेरा पैसा नहीं दिए हैं, I can use the bill of unpaid money as a collateral to borrow from the market. So that will allow MSME to get good quality working capital. That has been there. And the unified lending interface, एक जगह पे क्रॉस लेंडिंग हो सकती है, जैसे यूनिफाइड पेमेंट इंटरफेस है, कोई कहीं से किसी को पे कर सकता है, वैसे ही गवर्नमेंट ने यूनिफाइड लेंडिंग इंटरफेस बनाया है. एनीबडी कैन बोरो फ्रॉम एनीवेयर. सो MSME आर गेटिंग हेल्प्ड क्वाइट अ बिट हियर. ऑलराइट. And then of course the survey says that growth accounting exercise using a Cobb-Douglas function, but we'll not go into that depth, not needed. What is important to keep in mind is India's capital stock growth was 8.6% from 2003 to 12. But mind you, 2003 to 12, the global system was growing very fast. Export demand was growing very fast. FDIs were coming in quickly. So we could put more capital in picture. It has been 7.6% 13 to 20 because of the NPA issue, corporate balance sheet under stress because of over leverage, demand being low, तो ये थोड़ा कम हुआ. लेकिन between 2022 to 25, it has again come back to 7.9%. So we can expect a positive development of capital stock in future. अब ये revival कैसे develop हो रहा है? How is this revival happening? Because government खर्च कर रही है और साथ में प्राइवेट सेक्टर अब लगातार एक सिचुएशन फेस कर रहे हैं where they are using almost 80% of their capacity in many sectors like white goods, like electronics, like textile. So that is encouraging them to invest more. But again, unless we don't do reforms of input market, unless we don't create good quality infrastructure in local areas, we will not have capex rising as much. Also, ये ध्यान देना पड़ेगा कि रूरल एरियाज में, सेमी रूरल एरियाज में डिमांड कैपेसिटी बनाई जाए. कैसे बनाएं ये डिमांड कैपेसिटी? पैसे छाप के नहीं, लोगों को नौकरी देकर. Create a demand capacity in semi-rural areas, rural areas, not by printing money and distributing or doing a Ladki Bahin Yojana. Create that demand capacity by giving employment to people, by setting up medium-scale enterprises, freeing up ease of doing business, giving skill development to people. So then many people will be working, getting better income. They will create demand for products, which will incentivize the private sector to invest more. All right, so just keep that in your mind. So yes, with higher government expenditure, capital expenditure, we can expect crowding in. Crowding in का मतलब क्या होता है? If government creates better roads, better electricity, better ports, then the cost of production becomes less, and that encourages the private sector to participate in the production process. So the survey is pretty optimistic कि capital expenditure growth होगा. मैं भी optimistic हूँ, लेकिन government को reforms continue करने पड़ेंगे. Then जो labor input, तो capital grow हो रहा है देश में, थोड़ा slow है. Labor input का growth 2.3% रहा annually, proper participation के साथ. लेकिन again survey जब बोलते हैं rising participation especially among women, we still don't see a major increase. अगर मैं हटा दूं the women who are there for non-paid work, so I think there we need to work up. एक अच्छा कानून हमने बनाया labor law में. Now the restriction on women working in particular sector has been removed. Now the restriction on timings of women work has been removed, so that will attract more and more women to the workforce. Also the Labor input growth has been volatile in the recent past, but we will have to make sure that we create more skills for industries to employ people, and we create more industries to through ease of doing business to create more employment opportunity. दो बातें कही मैंने, लोगों को स्किल दीजिए ताकि वो इंडस्ट्री में एम्प्लॉय हो सके, कॉलेज के 3-4 साल रिगरसली पढ़ाइए, काम करने लायक बनाइए। 3-4 कॉलेज में कभी कभी हम स्कूल से भी कम पढ़ते हैं, 12th में ज़्यादा पढ़े, कॉलेज में कम पढ़े। How do we become able then as a worker? So this is one thing we should work on, and second thing we should work on is creating ease of doing business so that there are tremendous industrial opportunities and people can work on high value jobs. So factor productivity in India is rising. Total factor productivity hota hai labor plus land plus technology and other factors. In India, the total factor productivity was 1.9% growth rate, but post-pandemic, we see it has gone down a little. We expect it to rise again as supply chains become robust, people come out of the shock, and with government bringing in digital public infrastructure, cutting down the compliance cost, complementary reforms ला रही है गवर्नमेंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर लॉजिस्टिक्स। तो सर्वे ये कहते हैं कि एक हम कहते हैं नेचुरल रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ, एक इकोनॉमी की औकात कितनी है ग्रो करने की, उनका लैंड, उनका लेबर, उनका कैपिटल, उनके कानून, उनका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, इस सब को मिलाकर, जिसपे यूपीएससी ने एक सवाल पूछा था इन 2022, यूपीएससी आस्क्ड दिस क्वेश्चन, व्हाट इज पोटेंशियल जीडीपी? So that is the natural rate of growth. What is the capacity of the economy given land, labor, minerals, capital, and so, rules and regulations? So survey ने revise किया है. Survey ने कहा natural rate of growth of India given capital growth looks positive, labor growth looks positive, productivity growth looks positive, infrastructure development is having, capex is being done by government, reforms in taxation laws are being done. Survey says natural rate of growth of India was 6.5% from 2012 to 2024. They are increasing it to 7% now. सर्वे कहते हैं ऐसा लगता है कि इंडिया का नेचुरल रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ 7% करीब करीब पहुंच गया है. सो दैट लुक्स get better idea for growth in future. Then of course expanding growth frontier, जैसा हम लोग डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, कैपिटल स्टॉक ग्रोथ हैज बीन गुड, लेबर इनपुट ग्रोथ हैज बीन गुड एंड टीएफपी ग्रोथ हैज बीन गुड. तो इसीलिए आउटपुट ग्रोथ को 7% बताया गया है. अगर ये स्लाइड आपको दुखी करे तो आप स्किप कर सकते हैं इसको, लेकिन आप बस जो मैंने पिछले स्लाइड पे डिस्कशन किया वो ध्यान में रखेंगे. फ्यूचर आउटलुक क्या है फिर? पहली बात, सर्वे कहते हैं दैट फिस्कल ईयर 26 विल बी वाज मार्क्ड बाय एक्सटर्नल शॉक्स. 26 मतलब 2025-26, ये साल जो बीता अभी, विद ग्लोबल ट्रेड अनसर्टेनिटी, पेनल्टी टैरिफ्स, दे वर ऑल स्ट्रेनिंग आवर एक्सपोर्ट बिजनेस कॉन्फिडेंस. तो गवर्नमेंट ने इस केस को यूज किया. दे यूज्ड इट फॉर जीएसटी रैशनलाइजेशन, डीरेगुलेशन एंड कंप्लायंस सिंप्लीफिकेशन. क्वालिटी कंट्रोल ऑर्डर्स बहुत बड़े हेडेक थे, उनको कम करना हमने शुरू किया है. अननेसेसरी पुटिंग रेस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन इंपोर्ट्स ऑफ इंपॉर्टेंट रॉ मटेरियल, कि नहीं पहले जी हमसे सर्टिफिकेशन लीजिए तब आपको ऑर्डर मिलेगा. इसमें लोग कभी कभी पैसे भी बना रहे थे, कभी कभी लेजीनेस में फाइल्स पास नहीं होती थी. सो मेनी ऑफ द सिंप्लीफिकेशन ऑफ दीज रूल्स वाज इंपॉर्टेंट. वी आर नाउ डूइंग इट. डीरेगुलेशन के लिए 3 कमिटीज बना दी हैं अब गवर्नमेंट ने, अंडर शक्तिकांत दास, अंडर मिस्टर गाबा. So all these people are learned people, have worked in the ministry. So we can expect some more deregulation to happen. Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 is already in the picture. कल मुझे उम्मीद है बजट के साथ कुछ और इन्फॉर्मेशन हमें मिलना चाहिए. सर्वे कहते हैं that next year should be an adjustment year. कि सरकार ने सारे रिफॉर्म कर दिए हैं, अब फर्म्स को और कंपनीज को इस रिफॉर्म को कंप्लीट करना है और इन पर एक्ट करना है. अब सर्वे कहते हैं कि हमें उम्मीद है कंजम्पशन बढ़ेगा क्योंकि टैक्सेस कम किए गए हैं और एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट किया गया है. इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ेगा क्योंकि डिमांड ग्रो कर रहा है. पर वो कहते हैं लेकिन ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी बनी हुई है तो कुछ भी कमेंट करना मुश्किल है. दे आर एक्सपेक्टिंग कंजम्पशन टू राइज, इन्वेस्टमेंट टू राइज बिकॉज ऑफ रिड्यूस्ड टैक्सेस, इम्प्रूव्ड reforms, but then they say global uncertainty is there, so who knows what can happen. They also say that the global medium term outlook remains dim. Why? Because growth is modest, inflation is easing out, but the problem is that, and there will be monetary easing, but the problem is AI is booming a lot of it is bubble, जरूरत से ज़्यादा valuation है, वो नीचे आएगा. ऑल्सो ट्रेड कन्फ्लिक्ट्स अगर डोमिनेट किए तो ड्रैग करेंगे ग्रोथ को नीचे. तो मीडियम टर्म हम बहुत हाई ग्रोथ नहीं देख रहे हैं. India, of course, faces external uncertainties, but the good news is macroeconomically we are doing better at the moment. But then in future we will have to be conscious because अगर ट्रम्प के इंडिया पे टैरिफ्स बनी रही तो हमारे एक्सपोर्ट्स पे असर पड़ेगा, तो करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट पे खतरा है. ऐसे ही अगर गवर्नमेंट अपना अपना एक्सपेंडिचर को रैशनलाइज नहीं कर पाए, स्पेशली स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, तो डेट टू जीडीपी रेशियो बढ़ेगा, डेफिसिट बढ़ेगा. दैट दीज आर द challenges for medium term. Of course, thing is that survey is projecting a growth rate of 6.8 to 7.2%. That's quite optimistic. I am also expecting that next year India can grow around 7%. Let's keep the fingers crossed and hope that we keep growing and see a developed India in our lifetime. So, with that, I end the discussion here. Thank you all for joining. I will again meet you tomorrow and day after for budget, and then we will again come back to economic survey discussion. God bless you all. Keep studying well. Bye bye from my side.